Hi guys, I'm Jason White. This is my channel, Jason's Weird Reads. Thank you for clicking the play button, and if you like what you see here, please hit the subscribe if you haven't already, and like, and feel free to comment in the comment section. I love discussing books with people in the comment sections. Now, a few things have sort of collided to make this video. First, I was talking to a writer, Simon Strantzas, and I was talking to him about, and this was for the Darkness Dwells podcast. We were talking about stories that he likes to return to. Wanted to know what were some of the elements that made him return to a short story or whatever, because he listed this on his Facebook page, and they were all short stories, I believe. And so I just wanted to talk about those stories and what draws him to them, and why he rereads them and returns to them. And that got me to thinking, because recently I've been talking about books on this channel that I want to reread. And then I come across a couple of videos on YouTube or in my news feed or my video feed, and they were books I want to reread. So I was like, let's do a video on books I want to reread. Books that I own that I want to reread. There's a couple of books that I own, they're in storage, and so I didn't feel like going and digging through those, so they won't be in this video, unfortunately. But just know that this list is by far, it's not complete. There's so many books I want to read, never mind reread. And it's funny because I always feel guilty about rereading books, because it feels strangely unconstructive, as though, you know, you're not reading the newer stuff and it feels like you're falling behind. But I have reread some of these books, actually. I've reread, and I just want to return to them again. One of them, I'm going to start off with horror, and then I'm going to move into more contemporary literary type stuff, because and then I'm going to go back to the horror. I don't know, I didn't split it up like that on purpose. I just kind of made a couple of piles, and maybe it was an unconscious decision, but one was like all the literary stuff and the other was all the horror. The first book I'm going to mention is horror, just so you know I'm coming back to the horror, is The Screaming Skull. This is just an anthology edited by David G. Hartwell, and it's basically got a bunch of classic American ghost stories in here. So you're gonna find, I believe, you know, I've had this book forever, since I was a kid, I think. And this is, maybe not, let me see, what, 1994. Yeah, so I probably had it since I'm pretty sure I got this brand new. Probably got it around 1995 or so. I wasn't a kid, but this is what introduced me to a lot of classic horror fiction. And it has stories like The Screaming Skull, Ligeia by Edgar Allan Poe. Mark Twain has a ghost story. Nathaniel Hawthorne, Henry James, Edith Wharton, which is interesting. Edith Wharton actually didn't like ghost stories herself, and she would burn books if they had ghost stories in them and that were in her house, apparently. And that just seems kind of hypocritical to me. I didn't know that. I thought I didn't know who Edith Wharton was. I probably just forgot her name. Alright, so this book has also been floating around YouTube lately, and it's The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. Now this book is very depressing. It talks about mental illness, depression, and thoughts of suicide. I believe, if I remember correctly, the main character in this, who is basically, from what I can tell, Sylvia Plath, she talks about either having attempted to commit suicide or having the desire to commit suicide since the age of, I don't know, very young age, like 9 or 11. And that is pretty much, I don't really remember this book too much. I just remember it being very dark, very depressing. It's very much a discussion on depression. And if you know who Sylvia Plath is, then you know that she herself succumbed to depression, and and took her own life, which is really unfortunate. So if you're looking at this book and thinking, hey, I might want to read that, just know that there are some trigger warnings in regards to depression and suicide, so take heed. John Irving. I have 3 books here by John Irving, and I haven't read any John Irving in probably over 10 years, and all these books I haven't read in 10 years. The first one here I haven't reread at all, but I do want to reread, and that's The Hotel in New Hampshire. There's a funny, there's something, I don't really remember much of this book. I remember a bear chasing a guy on a motorbike, I think, and I think the bear was a tutu-wearing bear as well, wearing a ballerina's tutu. And because there's like circuses in this, that visit this hotel or something. That is very foggy. I remember the characters, and I remember John Irving actually in an interview getting kind of flustered with the interviewer because the interviewer was asking about his odd characters, and John Irving feels that his characters are not odd. And the reason why he feels that way is because they're normal to him. He's writing about people that he knows, and they become his characters. But, you know, having said that, with all respect to John Irving, his characters are kind of odd. But you know, they're fun to read. That's part of what makes reading John Irving books so entertaining is his odd characters. Now there's another part in here, and this is sort of a running theme of men with older women. There's an 18-year-old kid growing up in this hotel, and he joins, I believe, the wrestling team at his high school. And he might even be involved in other sports. Whatever the case is, he's training to be in shape, and so he uses the stairs of the hotel to run up and down them as exercise. And there's a woman who pretty much stays at the hotel permanently, who's an older woman, and she gets rather turned on by his running up and down the stairs because of how it makes him breathe. Makes him pant and breathe heavy, and he gets all sweaty, and to her that's a very sexual thing, and so she tries to seduce him. I can't remember if she's successful. It's a John Irving book, so probably. John Irving, that's a running theme through a lot of his books, is men with older women, and that follows through with the next book here, A Widow for 1 Year. I've reread this at least twice, maybe a third time, and the main character in this is Ruth, a little girl, and we follow her throughout her childhood, maybe not throughout her childhood, but through an incident in her childhood, and then through a few incidences in her adulthood. She's raised by her parents don't get along. They're sort of in the process of breaking up. The mother doesn't feel that she's good enough to be a mother. She doesn't want to be a mother, and she leaves. She eventually leaves, and and so the father is left to take care of little Ruth. And before they break up, though, they hire this young man. I believe his name is Nick. And he's like 18 years old, maybe even younger, 16. And he ends up having an affair with the wife. And this guy develops a thing for older women as you as you follow these characters throughout their adulthood. And the interesting thing about Nick is that he likes older women regardless. There's a sort of a caveat to his liking old women. As he ages, if he was like 18 and wanting to, or lusting after a woman in her 40s, then when he is 30, or when he was himself in his 40s, he would no longer lust after women who are the same age as him. He would be after women who are in their 60s and so on. So as he gets older, the older the woman that he wants to be with, and that's kind of funny. There's also a few really funny stories in this in this book, especially involving Ruth's dad. He's an artist, and he's kind of a slime bag in a sense, as he seduces his, he does like, he's not just an artist, he's also a children's writer. He writes and illustrates his own children's books, and that's pretty much how they make their living. But he also on the side does like some art projects where he will do nudes of women and seduce them and have his way with them for a while and then trash them. And he gets his just rewards with one of these women in a very comical way. And yeah, just definitely read this book. It's very much a life journey of Ruth and to some extent Nick, if I got his name right. And I love this book. It's very close to me, and I don't know why I don't identify with any of the characters, but I love falling into this world and just watching these people do human things, yet very oddly. And the third John Irving book is A Prayer for Owen Meany. This is actually my second time trying to do this video. The first time had way too many distractions and I didn't feel like doing the editing for it, so I started over. But this book, as I was saying the last time, you could read this at Christmas, because this isn't a Christmas book. That's important to say before I go into what I'm going to say. It's not a Christmas book, but there's a few times, because of the theme of, you know, the literary type following a person's life, this tends to fall on Christmas a few times. There's a few revisits to Christmases, and you could definitely read this at Christmas time and get all the Christmas feels, if that's what you're into. I love this book, not just for that, but Owen Meany is there's two characters you follow here, and it's very sort of deep friendship between the narrator. It's told in the first person. I can't remember the narrator's name, but Owen Meany is his friend, and Owen Meany is a little person, a dwarf, you could say, and he has a very loud, nasally sort of voice. And one thing that John Irving does that's interesting is whenever Owen Meany talks, he capitalizes the words, so you can see some dialogue there. This guy says, "This guy is a real mystery." But that sort of helps aid you. Anytime Owen Meany talks, you can hear his voice because of the capitalization of the words. It's a very, very good book. I loved it. A couple of war books here. First one, we were going to be doing a read-along with Dane Reads, and it didn't happen because his life got kind of chaotic, and you know, that happens. That's all cool. But I think I joined up for A Farewell to Arms. I might be wrong on this, but I know it was a Hemingway story, and this one I want to reread because it's really the only Hemingway book that I like, that I've read. I've read 2 or 3 of his books, and this is the only one I've liked. And I want to revisit it just to see if I still like it. The one reason why I don't like his other books is because I couldn't stand the characters. They're assholes. And you know what? I don't need to like the character in order to like a book. There had to have been some other elements. So if you know of any Hemingway books that you think I might like, feel free to suggest some in the comments. But this one was a good one, and it's a classic, and I just want to revisit it to see if I still like it. This book I've read, and I was talking about this book sometime within the last few months, where I recommended it to someone. I forget why, but I can't remember who it was either. But if you've seen the World War II movie, Enemy at the Gates, then this is basically that story. David L. Robbins wrote War of the Rats, and he did a bunch of World War II books. And this one takes place during the Battle of Stalingrad. It's a very brutal battle. And you're following a couple of snipers here, a group of Russian snipers who are working hard to save their city from the German invasion. And Vasiliev, I think is his name. I can't remember. He's the one who becomes like a star. His army uses him as a way to motivate the soldiers. They sort of create a hero through him, but there's so much more to this story than that. One thing that's interesting in this book is there was a lot of female Russian snipers, and there's a couple of female Russian snipers in here, and so you basically follow Vasilis, if that's his name, as he as he struggles, and the Germans catch on to what's going on, and so they bring in their own snipers. And I could be remembering the movie more than the book, and that's one reason why I want to reread the book, because the movie didn't credit this book at all. It's taken from history, so it's the same story, just of course you don't need to credit history. You don't credit any other writers who picked up on the same thing. But it's a fascinating read from my memories, and very dark, and the movie really does absolutely no justice to the story, and compared to the way that David L. Robbins did. So I highly recommend this book, and I recommend myself rereading it. Oh, I've got some big books here. All right, now this is the horror, and a lot of it, actually all of it, is short story. Including what I started off with, is short stories. First I'm going to go, or at least collections. I think they're all collections, there's no more anthologies, but Tales of Pain and Wonder by Kiernan. Now, you could argue that this isn't horror, because she doesn't like being called a horror writer, and that's fine. But it's definitely dark fantasy. These stories are very dark, and you can't escape the fact that there's elements of horror in almost every one of her stories. It's very, very dark and very weird. Lately I've been going, I love weird fiction, and that's why I named my channel Weird Reads, because I love weird fiction. I like it more than horror, but weird fiction often reflects, weird fiction is not defined by any genre itself. It can be science fiction, it can be fantasy, it can be contemporary. But I find that most weird fiction is horrific and dark fantastic. And this is certainly one of them. And I don't remember any of the stories in here, to be honest with you. But for the longest time, if I were to name a favorite writer, it would have been Kiernan. Her prose is, it's exquisite. It's beautiful. Her content is very, very dark, and sometimes it's very difficult to really understand what's going on. And I just love that sort of thing. So I definitely want to revisit this. This is like one of her first collections, if not her first. I don't think it's her first, but it's been a while. This book came out in 2000, so probably not, but it's definitely one of her firsts. And yeah, I definitely want to reread these stories. She's a very prolific writer. She's written probably hundreds upon hundreds of short stories since this one, and or since these stories. So she's obviously evolved a lot since then. It's a dog howling. I definitely want to revisit these older ones, or whatever. This one, I harp about this book a lot, and there's a reason for it. It's very, very good. I'm not going to talk about it for too long, because I've kind of rambled on long enough, but definitely check out Secrets of Ventriloquism if you haven't. It's very, very good book. It's very dark, and the first two stories are absolutely the most typical stories you're going to run into. Then it goes into some very strange territory, and if you can, get a hold of the audio version, because it's read by the author, John Padgett, and he does a phenomenal job. He himself is a ventriloquist, so he knows how to add that sort of element into his stories, and I absolutely love this. I read it last year, and I just want to read it again. This is a book I think I could listen to or read every year and be fascinated by. And a big influence on John Padgett is Thomas Ligotti, and this was my first foray into Thomas Ligotti's dark worlds. I had this on before this version came out on paperback. I could be wrong, like with this cover. I don't remember. You know what, I'm not even going to go there. I'm just going to say that about 8 years ago I had this on Kindle, and it was, my favorite type of fiction is fiction that lays in a sort of where reality is being played with, and Thomas Ligotti certainly does that. He also inserts his own very dark philosophies into his stories, and to be honest with you, I don't exactly remember all the stories in here, but the stories I do remember were mind-blowing, and I want to revisit this dark and creepy world and very, very weird world, and I want to read all of Ligotti's work, to be honest with you. I was reading, when I started this channel, I was reading another collection of his, the Penguin release of Grimscribe, and I kind of stopped. I want to get back into that. There's so many books. So there's that. And then lately I've been in a bit of a Lovecraft mood, and I've been reading some Lovecraftian fiction, especially fiction written by Willem Pugmire, who, you know, sadly recently passed away. I've been reading, I've got like 2 collections on the go of his that I'm reading, and he was a very, very Lovecraftian, very much a Lovecraftian writer, and he's going to be really missed. He had his own sort of spin on things, and I loved it. But you know, I want to also read some Lovecraft fiction, and this is my this is a collection that I have of annotated works, or his works annotated, and they were annotated by Leslie S.Klinger, and I've always wanted to get to this book. I believe I asked for this for Christmas one year, and I've never really read it. I've read pretty much all of H.P. Lovecraft's stories, but I've always wanted to read the annotated ones because there's always a lot of really great pieces of information. So, for an example, on the inside here, this would be the main text of the story, and then her notes here, and there's like tons of notes and pictures. And sorry, Leslie is a man. As I said, her, it's a he. My apologies. But yeah, definitely H.P. Lovecraft. There's a very dense sort of writer who really loved purple prose. He probably shouldn't have written that way, but there's a lot of things Lovecraft shouldn't have done. Lovecraft, he was more about the content rather than, and there's some people who really like his language, and you know what, the prose that he does really adds to his stories too. So, you know, I'm kind of hard on his prose, because who says gibbous moon when they mean the moon is full? But, you know, that was his choice. You could say that about a lot of other writers that I enjoy. So there you have it. These are books I want to reread. Doesn't mean I will reread them. I've got a lot on my plate, but these are books that are really calling to me lately, and I just want to get back and reread them. I wish we could stop time, you know, and just spend like a few years doing nothing but reading. All right, that's it for me. Thank you. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching, and keep being creative, and I will catch you in the next bookish video.